Hey there, I'm Asis and welcome to Pangeo Hub. This is a forum which is all about learning geology and finding solution to your geological quest. Here we are going to offer free live lectures to all the geology enthusiasts who are looking to appear for JAM, GET or UGC NET right till their next exams. Apart from the free live lectures, you'll be getting access to subject-wise question banks for all the respective exams. And moreover, for those who are joining us before 15th of August, we are offering 74 free mock tests that will help you enhance your problem solving skills. For further details, you can visit us at www.pangeohub.com, and for any other queries, you can always write to us at pangeohub@gmail.com. This is first among a series of videos that we are going to put online for all of you to have a rough idea about our approach to different subjects. In this one, we are going to learn about crystallization relation in a two-component solid solution phase diagram. I'll put my video off and then we can start the lecture slowly, and as and when required, I'll put myself on to discuss. Okay, so yeah, so crystallization relation in a two-component solid solution phase diagram. So here the key term is crystallization, which is transformation from melt to solid. So what we are looking at exactly is a melt solid equilibrium or a solid liquid equilibrium, and then there are two components which are miscible in solid state forming solid solutions. So to start with, let's look at a typical one component PT phase diagram for a pure substance. Let's say we think of a substance A, and this is the typical diagram. So in this diagram, the melting point curve, which has which separates the solid and liquid phase fields, has a positive slope and a positive steep slope, and then you have liquid and vapor phase field which are separated by the boiling point curve, which is also kind of positive but shallower, and then you have the sublimation curve, which is separating the solid and vapor phases, and all these three curves intersect at the triple point where you have all the solid, liquid and vapor phases, all the three phases coexisting together. If you want to find the degree of freedom in different phase fields in this phase diagram, you can use the Gibbs phase rule, which is P plus F equals C plus 2, where P is the number of phases, F is the degree of freedom, and then you have C as the number of components, and 2 here refers to P and T, which are the intensive variables. So if I ask you to find degree of freedom in the solid phase field at, let's say, a point A, then here the number of phases is 1, which is solid, then the degree of freedom is 2. And if I ask you to find a degree of freedom, let's say on this curve, the univariate curve on the curve where you have coexisting solid and liquid, so this is the solid liquid equilibrium. So in this case, the number of phases is 2, so the degree of freedom becomes 1. And then if I ask you to calculate degree of freedom, let's say at this point, which is C, so in that case, you have all the three phases coexisting. So the number of phases is 3 and the degree of freedom is 0. So you see, fields are divariant, lines are univariant, and points are invariant in these diagrams. And okay, one more thing, all these phase diagrams are constructed are always assumed as closed system. This is very important as we go on discussing let's say two components, and maybe in future we will be discussing three components and stuff. So but you should always remember that whatever phase diagrams we are studying, we are always considering a closed system. What it means is there is energy can be transferred, energy can be transferred, but mass is not transferred. It's not transferred. So there is no mass coming in and going out of the system, whereas however the system can lose its temperature, leading lose its temperature, or maybe there can be change in pressure leading to development of different phases depending on the PT conditions. So this is all about one component system. Now we are really interested in understanding the two component system. So what we'll do, we'll add one more component and see how it behaves. So you see, if I take a particular pressure, so then this solid phase A will have a melting point here at this pressure. So now let's see, I take two components. So in that case I can draw, let's say this is your, okay, this is like this. Let's say this is A, and then I have another, let's say single phase, this is one component system A, and this is another one component system B, and I can take this as the pressure axis. This is P. So you see, at any pressure I have melting point of A at this point, and then I have melting point of B at this point. What I am interested in finding the melting point of the intermediate compositions, which is this one, A to B. How is the melting point going to vary if I take a composition which is somewhere here or somewhere here? So this is 100% A, and on the right side we have 100% B. I'm talking about taking a composition which is intermediate between A and B and trying to find out how is the melting point relation going to change. Is it going to be a straight line, or is it going to kind of be curved or something? We do not know. So this is what we are interested in. So now see what has happened in effect. So when we had one component system, so we had two main variables, which was pressure and temperature. Now I have added another variable, which is composition, which is this one, x. So now I have three variables, p, this is x, and then I have another variable t. So I have p, t, and x. So the problem is plotting in a PTX space will generate diagrams which are pretty difficult to understand on a 2D plane. So for that we need to fix one variable. So now what are the options? I have pressure, temperature, and composition. Now which one to fix? So this really depends on what we are interested in understanding. So what we are interested in understanding is crystallization, right? I said we are trying to understand the crystallization behavior in a two component solid solution. So we are looking at crystallization. So what we are essentially interested in is this solid liquid equilibria, this solid liquid equilibria. So if you have a let's say one component system, so this is how it was like this, and this is PT. So you have solid liquid here. So you see this solid liquid equilibrium is not that sensitive to pressure. It's not that sensitive to pressure, as this has a steep slope. So this one. So you see the slope is steep. So as the slope is steep, this is not kind of that much sensitive to pressure. So what we can do, we can fix the pressure. P fixed. So in that case, what will happen? We will be constructing what kind of diagrams? So we'll be constructing all TX diagrams. TX diagrams. And in that case, what will happen to the phase rule that we were applying to find out the degree of freedom and let's say coexisting phases at a point? So that was P plus F equals to C plus 2, the normal phase rule. Now as we have fixed pressure, this 2 will reduce to 1. So P plus F becomes C plus 1. This is known as the reduced phase rule. So why it is how it is applied? So it is applied for a system which is isobaric. So now we will be looking at isobaric TX sections for different kinds of systems. So it can be, if the depending on the kind of curves we have, we can have a eutectic, solid solution, peritectic. So these are the things we will discuss further. So now for the timing, we are interested in solid solutions. So how does a solid solution TX curve looks like? So this is how, this is an example of TX solid solution curves. So these are basically loops in PT space, TX space. So you see this is your temperature versus you have composition. So these are TX space and you have typical loops like this. So be it for, now you have examples of two common minerals in petrology that we always discuss. They have extensive solid solution. One is olivine and then other one is plagioclase, having extensive solid solution between the end members phosphorite and phyolite, and then you have albite and anorthite in here. So both of them are actually they show substitutional solid solutions. So if you read about solid solutions in mineralogy, maybe sometimes later, or if you have read earlier, you know that solid solution can be substitutional, it can be omission, it can be there are 3-4 more types of solid solution. So what we are looking at here is couple like substitutional solid solution, where ions are substituting for each other to change the compositions from one end member to the other. So now moreover, you see there are another one more difference, major difference is that olivine it has a simple substitution, whereas plagioclase it has a couple substitution, and this is the substitution vector for uh, plagioclase, and this substitution vector for olivine. Now if you really want to find out what is the substitution vector given the n members, you can easily derive this out. So there is no need to memorize this if you know the n members. So how we can write it is pretty simple. Let's try. So for that sake, let's say I want to find out the substitution vector for the plagioclase system. So I can write the formula of the one n member, which is albite, which is NaAl Si3O8, and then I have the another n member which is anorthite, the formula for which is CaAl2Si2O8. Now if I cancel O8 by O8, is cancelled, Si3 Si2, then this is cancelled, I'll be left with one Si extra, and then if I cancel Al to Al, there will be left I'll be left with one Al extra in the lower side. So now what I'm exactly getting is NaSi in top and then Ca here on the bottom. So you see I could derive the substitution vector from the n member formulas. This is pretty easy. Now this can be, you can do the similar things for, let's say, olivine or maybe pyroxene system to find out the substitution vectors. Okay, and okay, so now let's talk about what are these phase diagrams and what are the different phase fields and how they are defined. So as I told you, this is the loop. So the upper part of the loop, the upper curve is known as liquidus. So which essentially means that a curve above which everything is liquid. So this all filled, this one's this filled, this is all liquid, and then you have the lower curve, which is this one. So this is known as solidus. So it is defined as a curve below which everything is solid. So another way of defining is the liquidus is the freezing point curve and solidus is the melting point curve. So freezing point in the sense, if you take any composition, let's say from here, if you are dropping, at what point you start to crystallize or freezing or freeze a magma. So that is the temperature. So if you go on joining these temperatures, you get the freezing point curve, and whereas the lower one is known as the melting point curve, where if you have magma composition, you rise the temperature where the first melt starts to form. So that is the melting point curve. So now what we are going to do is look at crystallization of magma in this typical solid solution systems. So crystallization actually has two n member processes. One is equilibrium crystallization, which is whereby the crystallizing minerals remains in contact with the melt throughout the crystallizing process. It means whatever melt the crystals are forming, it is remaining in the system throughout, and it's not being removed from the system, so it is always allowed to react with the melt. Whereas fractional crystallization is a process where the crystallizing mineral is immediately extracted from the melt, and such that it is not allowed to react with the melt further. So you are kind of separating out the crystals from the melt and not allowing the reaction to take place. But in nature you have something which is kind of, these are two n members. So in nature there is we follow some intermediate path which is like somewhere in between these two extreme mentions, these two extreme processes. So what we do is we start with equilibrium crystallization in a plagioclase system, and then we'll slowly look into fractional crystallization, how the magma kind of, how the magma evolves if we are crystallizing in an equilibrium system, and if you are fractionating the magma or the crystals, how is the crystallization sequence changing. So let's start with equilibrium crystallization in a plagioclase system. So what we can do is we can take a magma composition, let's say somewhere here, which is, let's say, this one. So this is point A having magma composition, which is, so we can drop a vertical line directly from here. So this is magma which is having anorthite 60%. If I ask you what is the degree of freedom at point A, so at A we have phase S equals to 1, which is all liquid, then F equals to C, which is minus P plus 1 because it's an isobaric system. We have fixed the pressure, so this pressure is fixed at 1 atm. Okay, so we will if there is a change in pressure, we will define it. Let's say then it will be mentioned, like let's say if I want to check it at 5 kilobar, then I have to fix the pressure at 5 kilobar, so on. So this will be defined. Unless defined, this is taken as 1 atm. So F equals to C minus P plus 1. Components are 2, phases are 1, this is 1, so this becomes 2. So you see the field is still a divariant. You still have a divariant field in this case. Now as you come and touch this point, so this point let's say is B, so here you form liquid L1, the first crystal starts to form. So at this point what will happen, you are starting to crystallize some solid. So what is the composition of that solid? So you can find out by drawing a tie line. So what does the tie line represent? So this is a tie line, okay, tie line. A tie line represents coexisting solid and liquid at equilibrium at a given temperature. So it's an isothermal line joining coexisting solid and liquid in equilibrium. So if you want to find the composition of the solid that is crystallizing, you can drop a line vertically down from here to read off on the composition axis. This is, let's say, anorthite 90. So you are crystallizing a solid which is anorthite 90 from a melt which is anorthite 60. So now if I, so see, now we have fixed the pressure. We have two variables, one is temperature, another one is composition. So let's see how these two variables or the two vectors are varying. So I'm drawing a zoomed in view of this. So you have something like this. This is your, this is the liquidus basically. Okay, let me make it a bit thinner. Okay, yeah. So this is your liquidus. Okay, now, so you had this melt of composition, this one A, it came down here. Now you are allowing the melt to cool, so you are basically dropping the temperature. So the temperature vector is always vertically downwards. Now you are separating out a solid which is more anorthitic than the melt. So then the liquid will become more albitic. So a simple analogy to this will be, you think of salt water and sugar solution. Now if I start taking out salt, what will happen? The water will become more and more sweet. Or if I start taking out let's say sugar, the water will become more salty. So the thing is, whatever you are taking out, the melt composition is going to move away from it. So you can easily think of, so as you are taking out anorthite which is on this side, the melt composition is going to move away from anorthite. So this is the composition vector in which you are moving. So this is your temperature vector, this is your composition vector. So the liquid, basically the magma, follows the resultant of the temperature and the composition vector, which is actually lying on the curve. So this curve is basically the resultant of temperature and composition. If you kind of change this thing, then it will not follow the curve, and that will be disequilibrium, that we'll be discussing further. So now what has happened? So you had you had a magma at A here. You said okay, you want to allow it to cool, so it started cooling. So till it touched here, you had what? You had only liquid. So you calculated the degree of freedom like this. So you calculated something like this, and then as you touched at point B, so what has happened? So at B, liquid L1 has reacted, is giving rise to solid S1, and as a result of production of solid S1, the liquid composition changes to L2. So L1 giving rise to S1 plus L2. So this is what has happened. So this is basically a continuous reaction, because this is the reaction that is going to continue throughout as you go on decreasing the temperature. So this reaction is taking place over a range of temperatures, and hence is known as continuous. And now that's why you can say that this diagram corresponds to the right hand side of the Bowens reaction series, which is the Plagioclase series. Why it is known as continuous? Because this is a reaction, this is related by this reaction, which is a continuous reaction, which is taking place over a range of temperatures. So now let's drop the temperature slowly. So what is going to happen? So as you drop the temperature slowly, the liquid composition is going to change from L1 to L2. So you are going to move from L1 to L2 here, and this will start forming solid S2. And similarly, you can again lower the temperature, the composition will change, the liquid will become L3, the solid will start forming solid S3. This will continue like this. So what is actually happening? So the liquid composition is becoming more and more albitic, as well as you see the solid composition also surprisingly is becoming more and more albitic. Now we said this is a closed system, right? This is a closed system. So in a closed system, if one thing is increasing, the other should decrease. But here both are becoming rich in albite. I mean to say, if you are increasing the, if the melt is becoming more and more albitic, the solid should become more and more anorthitic. But both are becoming simultaneously rich in albite. How is that possible? So this is the question that we should understand. So to solve this or to have an idea or why this happens can be understood from the lever rule. So what is lever rule and why lever rule is important? Because see, we are saying both are becoming alphabetic, but we are not looking at the proportions. So if we look at the proportions, we will understand what is really happening in the system. So for that, we have to understand the lever rule. So what is lever rule? See, yeah. So let's go here. So for the lever rule, let me construct this diagram first before going into lever rule. So this is the diagram you have. You have a magma of this composition. Okay. So this is your basically fulcrum, the bulk. This is your bulk. At some point you have uh, L1 here, uh, L1 here, which is in equilibrium with S1 here, or you can say L2 in equilibrium with S2. So you see this center is basically the bulk composition. So bulk composition is basically the fulcrum. Now you can relate this diagram, you can relate basically this diagram with these diagrams. So how are they related? You see, if you have the fulcrum sitting here, if you have the fulcrum sitting here, then if masses, if this is m1 and this is m2, then the length of the rods are in proportion to the masses of the bodies. If you want to maintain the seesaw at equilibrium, means both should be balanced. So if I increase this mass, let's say if I increase the mass to here, this is m2 and this is m1, where m2 is greater than m1, and if I still want to balance this, then what I have to do, I have to make this guy sit at a distance which is proportional to his weight. So it means now if this guy is sitting closer, in that case still this will be balanced. So his mass is proportional to this length. Okay, let me use some other color so that you can understand. So this guys is this proportion, and this guys, this is the proportional length. You understand? So now what it means is, if I have s1 s2 sitting here, and if I want to find out what is the amount of s2, then I have to look at a length which is opposite to s2, which is this one. And if I want to understand what is the amount of L2, then I have to look at a length which is opposite to L2, which is this one. So this is all about lever rule. And if you go into the mathematics of it, so it says like for a perfectly balanced lever, mass m1 multiplied by the length of its arm, so equal mass m2 multiplied by length L2. And if you kind of solve this, what you get is m1 equals to, this is important, m1 equals to L2 by L1 plus L2. This is what exactly we discussed. So you see, this is mass m1, this is length L1, this is length L2. So it says mass m1 is equals to L2. L2 is this one, L2 by L1 plus L2. Okay, so this mass is proportional to this length, and then this mass m2 is proportional to L1. M2 is proportional to L1. So now you have understood. Now let's see how these proportions are playing a role, such that we see both like albeit both the solids and liquid becoming rich in albite, but still how do we explain it? So for that, I take the diagram again and construct this thing. So I took I take magma compositions there again and drop. So this was my bulk. So now you understand, this is basically the fulcrum. So why I'm writing fulcrum, just to keep in analogy with the lever or the seesaw we saw, where fulcrum was the center. So this is fulcrum or the bulk, the way we say it. So you see, as you touch this point, so you are here A, at B you have magma L1, it is forming solid S1. If I want to calculate what is the proportion of solid and liquid, see the fulcrum, where is the fulcrum? The fulcrum is here. So the solid, the amount of solid will be S1, the opposite length there is nothing. So at, let's say, temperature T1, at T1 uh, it is 99.99% liquid. Now what happens? I drop the temperature. As the temperature is cooling, so I have a temperature vector moving down, and then the composition vector is shifting this direction, so I move to this direction. So I move from L1 to L2 here, and then again I have this length which is S2. Okay, now if I want to calculate, how can I calculate? So now let's just say this point is C, this point is D, and this point is E. If somebody asks you to calculate what is the proportion of solid and liquid, so solid is S2, the proportion of solid is basically what? The length opposite to it. So the amount of S2 is equals to CD by CD plus DE, or you can write simply is equals to CD by CE into 100. So this is the amount of S2, and amount of L2 is just opposite, DE by CE into 100. So you see, although both are becoming albetic, but the proportion, so see, this was solid which was more anorthotic, the solid which is more anorthotic, the amount is increasing. So overall the system is remaining same, but the proportion of solid is increasing and the proportion of melt is decreasing, and as a result both are moving towards albite. So this is what is exactly happening. Okay, so I think, yeah, this is fine. So now what will happen? See, so at this point it is 99.9% melt. Now it will go on cooling like this, like this. Now as it touches this point here, so what happens at this point? You have 100% solid. So it means this is SF, the final solid. You cannot drop a temperature below this because all the crystals have formed. If all the crystals have formed, so the liquid actually has moved from uh, here to here, the solid has moved from here to here, and the final solid that is forming is having a composition which is same as that of the bulk composition. So final solid is equal to bulk melt, bulk or initial melt composition. Initial melt composition. So this is typical of equilibrium crystallization. Equilibrium crystallization. So in equilibrium crystallization, the one thing that is very important is the fulcrum. So if you know the fulcrum, you can always calculate what is the proportion of solid to liquid. Yeah, so I think, yeah, this is all about crystallization in yeah, if now you see, now you have reached here, so let's calculate the degree of freedom at point B here. So what will be the degree of freedom if somebody asks you? So at point B I have F equals to C minus P plus 2. Okay, let me thin it a bit. So two component phases are how many? I have two phases, liquid L1 and S1 together. So two phases plus uh, yeah, so plus 1. So 2 plus 1, 3 minus 2 is 1. So you see that the line is again univariant here. So this is very important. Achha. At this point what happens? Now you have lost a phase. So you gain a degree of freedom, and then you are free to cool down like this. So then you can move down like along this path, okay, to go and crystallize 60% another. So this will be your solid evolution path, and this is your liquid evolution path. So I think, yeah, this is more or less clear about the lever rule and equilibrium crystallization in a solid solution, Plagioclase solid solution system. Now let's move on to fractional crystallization. So what happens if I'm fractionally crystallizing a solid? So fractional crystallization, as I said you, it's about removing the crystal that is forming from the melt. So now you are not allowing the crystal to take part or react with the liquid. So this reaction, what we was writing L1 giving rise to S1 plus L2, you are not allowing this S1 to react. Okay. So now the thing is, so let's see how this will affect. So now I have a bulk composition here. So this is, let's say again, the same thing. I'm taking at 60. So this is the bulk composition at 60. I touch this point, I allow to cool. So I come here, I start crystallizing L1. Means the liquid is L1. It starts forming solid S1. Now what happens? This solid, as soon as it forms, I remove this solid from the system. I take it out. Now if I take it out, this thing is going to happen. This is the temperature vector going down, this is the composition vector going down. So as it is forming, the solid has formed, the liquid is going to change. So liquid is evolved from L1 to the liquid has evolved from L1 to L2, let's say. So it has moved from here to here, but what we have is now we do not have any solid to maintain the equilibrium at this point. So now the bulk composition itself has changed from here to here. So this is my new bulk composition. What will happen? Again, I'll crystallize this. From here, I'll crystallize solid S2, and then S2 is again removed. So as S2 is removed, I move from liquid L2 to L3. Now this becomes my new bulk composition. This becomes my new bulk composition. So you see, the bulk composition is slowly changing. The bulk composition is slowly changing. So this again you will crystallize S3. Now again the bulk composition can change from here to, let's say, you go to this point, and then the bulk composition is lying here. You have something here, and then you are forming a solid which is S4. So if you efficiently go on crystallizing like this, the liquid can move right from here till here, and similarly the solid can move from here till here. So you see, if you are fractionating efficiently, if you are fractionating efficiently, you can form pure albite, pure albite from a given bulk, because the bulk composition is slowly changing. The bulk composition is slowly changing. Yeah, so I think, yeah, this is all about fractional crystallization, where you have kind of the bulk composition which is slowly shifting as you are removing the solid which is crystallizing. So you are slowly taking out the solid which is forming. So what we do next is try and see how we find zoning in plagioclases and disequilibrium to which is related to fractional crystallization, and sometimes just disequilibrium happens. So let's see. So uh, plagioclase is one common mineral in igneous petrology that is zoned. So now the question is, why something will be zoned? So what kind of texture is zoning? So zoning is a texture, right? So this is called a disequilibrium texture. Disequilibrium. So disequilibrium means the equilibrium is somehow disturbed. So what are the factors that control equilibrium? So we have to discuss that, and then we can understand zoning, how it develops. So you see, I told you plagioclase is having solid solution between the end members, where you have NaSi substituting for CaAl. Now what we have to really understand is how this kind of substitution takes place. So this takes place by diffusion. So diffusion is the mechanism to cause this change or substitute the ions from let's say the solid S1 to S2. So what I mean by this is, let's say I have this magma composition here. It forms a solid S1 L1. So now the magma, you say it evolves to L2, so it comes here. So you have solid S1 forming like this, okay, and then the magma has evolved to L2. So then it has to form solid S2 which is stable. Now the solid S1 was more rich in calcium. So what will happen? So this will start shedding. So from here calcium and aluminium will move or diffuse out to the melt, and from melt you will bring in Na and Si, and as a result the composition of S1 will change to S2. So this is what will happen. So this is all being taking place by diffusion. Now if now diffusion is kind of a slow process, at least in solid state. So in that case, if the cooling is kind of fast, so this there is no time for diffusion to take place, and as a result the solid S1 that formed, it fails to react with the liquid. And by reaction I means there is diffusion of Ca and Al from the solid to the melt, and then there is Na and Si coming in from melt to the crystal to generate the next set of crystal which is S2. So now this reaction is unable to take place as the rate of cooling is faster. So in that case what will happen? There will be disequilibrium. Now if there is disequilibrium, then what will happen? So what will happen is, now you see you form the solid S1 like this. You have crystallized S1. You have crystallized S1 like this, and then you are going to, you have dropped the temperature and the liquid has changed to L2, means it has gone from here to here. And in the meantime, now you want to change the solid from S1 to S2, but the cooling is faster. As the cooling is faster, it doesn't take time to, it doesn't get the time to diffuse. So what will happen, S1 will act as an embryo. So this act as an embryo or nucleus, and above this S2 will start going. S2 will start going. This is S2. So you see, now you are generating plagioclases of different compositions. So again, if you go on dropping the temperature, let's say you drop the temperature, so the liquid evolves from L2 to L3, then you will produce solid S3. So again, S3 will form like this, and then if you drop further, it will change to L4, forming solid S4. So it will slowly become like this. So you see, a plagioclase, it's like this, and then you have, so this is let's say 90, this is 80, this is 70, you have 60. So you see, this is let's say 90, this is 80, this is 70. So from core to rim, if I plot anorthite content, it is what is happening, the anorthite content, it is decreasing. So this is known as normal zoning. This is known as normal zoning, where there is a drop in anorthite content from core to rim. So the core is calcic and the rim is sodic. So this is calcic and this is sodic. So this is how a normal zoning can develop. So the causes for normal zoning will be fast cooling and evolving magma composition. Magma composition. Now, apart from normal zoning, we know. So this is normal zoning. Normal zoning. So where you have, let's say if I plot anorthite from core to rim, so there is a drop. You can have reverse zoning, where core to rim the anorthite content increases. This is second case, and then you have a more common oscillatory zoning. This is pretty common, where you have, it's like fluctuating from core to rim. So this is also possible. So now already we have seen normal zoning. Now let's see how a reverse zoning can develop and how we can get both normal and reverse zoning. So one mechanism that can develop, that can lead to formation of reverse zoning is magma, this thing, magma mixing. So now let's see how magma mixing works. So we can take two magma compositions. Let's say I take a magma composition here, so which is okay, no problem. So I'm taking M1 here, magma. So this is producing a solid, which is S1. So I have a magma here which is producing a solid S1. So this is in a magma M1. Now I can have another magma here which is at a higher temperature. Let me take a different color. This is magma M2 which is producing a solid which is S2. So now I have another magma like this which is M2 and it is producing a solid S2. What I say is, how about we mix this two magma? That's what magma mixing really is, right? You mix two magmas. So if I mix this two magma, the resultant magma composition, like the mixture of the two magmas, will lie somewhere on a line which is joining these two things. So this is the mixing line. So the resultant magma will lie somewhere on this. So let's say the resultant magma lies here. This is mm, the mixed magma. So you see this is super cold. So what will happen? It will try to attain this equilibrium curve here. To attain this, it will crystallize a solid which is Sm. So now you see the mixed magma is mm. So with this, the solid which is in equilibrium with is Sm. So now you have a magma chamber like this. You have floating S1 and S2. But the problem is the one which is stable with this is this thing. So what will happen? This will change. How it will change? See. So now you see S1 is unstable. So this is unstable and this also is unstable. So as they are unstable, so what they'll do is this S1. Okay, let me draw S1 here. The black. Now this is S1 like this. So S1 you see is at a lower temperature than SM, the magma or MM. So this what will happen? This S1 will be the magma MM will corrode this S1 like this. So this magma, this S1 will be corroded like this. It will become rounded, and above this, what will happen? There will be growth of SM. There will be growth of SM. This is SM. S2, however, is at a higher temperature, so you cannot. This magma MM cannot corrode S2. So S2 will stay like that, and there will be growth of SM above it, just like this. So this is S2 and then there is SM growing above it. So you see what is S1? So S1 is sodium rich. So let's take another color maybe. Yeah. So this is sodium rich, and then you have calcium rich rim. So you are going from sodium to calcium. So anorthite content is increasing. Anorthite content is increasing. Anorthite from core to rim. And in this one, you have calcic thing and then sodic rim. So the anorthite content is decreasing. So you have normal zoning here. Sorry, you have a normal zoning here and a reverse zoning here. So in a rock, if you are getting both normal and reverse zone plagioclasts, this is a very good example of magma mixing. So this is good example of magma mixing. Now, one thing that we have not discussed yet is the effect of water on this thing. Water actually acts as an impurity, and if you add impurity to anything, it will decrease its melting point. A good analogy will be thinking of, let's say, cooking vegetables, where you have, let's say, you want to melt the onions that you add first. So what do you do if you want to melt the onions faster? You add some salt. So what does the salt do? It decreases the melting point, and as a result, the onion is melted fast, and you say, okay, it is cooked, and then you go on adding other stuff. So similarly, if you add water into this albite anorthite system, let's say this is P at 1 atm, this is dry pressure. If I add P equals to 0.2 water pressure, that is pH2o. So better write pH2o. Yeah, pH2o 0.2. So what will happen? It will reduce the melting point. Now, as both of these are tectosilicates having same silicate structure, the amount of water that will the amount of lowering in melting point will be similar. So it will move symmetrically downwards. So this will move like this. So this will become something like this with reduction in water. And then if you go on adding some more water, this can even become like this. So you see how the water is playing a role. So it leads to adding water lowers the melting point. So now imagine you are having a magma composition here like this. So it was crystallizing a solid of this composition S1 50%. So it was crystallizing S1 50% anorthite. Now suddenly let's say now you are crystallizing what, it's a plagioclase, it's anhydrous. So you now you are crystallizing some anhydrous phases. So what will happen? The magma will become more rich in water. Now you imagine that the magma had some water before, and now as you took out some anorthite or maybe plagioclase of 50%, so you are taking out some anhydrous solid, the magma become more rich in water, so the water pressure increased. Now as the water pressure increased, so the phase diagram will move down, then we can consider the red phase diagram. So in that case, what will happen? Liquid L1 will now be stable with a solid which is S2, producing a composition like this. So now you will have something which is crystallizing above this like this. This is S2. You see, you have a 50 anorthite and then you have 90 anorthite. So there is core to rim increase in anorthite content. This is also example of reverse joining. So you see, if you have drop in water pressure, it can cause it can lead to formation of reverse joining in plagioclases. If you have change in magma composition, you can develop normal and reverse joining in plagioclases. If you are changing, let's say, normally you are dropping the temperature faster, you are cooling it faster, then you can develop normal joining in plagioclases. I can ask you some few questions on this. Now we have, I told you about minerals like olivine, pyroxenes, and then plagioclases, which are all solid solution minerals. But if you look at thin sections, you will find that plagioclase is one which is pretty commonly joined, but not olivines and pyroxenes. So why is that? Why joining is common in plagioclase? This is one question that you can answer. And moreover, you'll find there are, if you look at plagioclase grains, there are joining which is more common towards the rim than towards the core. Then why joining is more common at the rims? The rims. So these are few of the questions that we can definitely address as we move on, and we kind of discuss this further when we are going for the live classes in near future. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Please join us today to access all the free lectures that is starting from 15th August, and do visit us at www.pangeohub.com. Thanks a lot. We'll see you soon. Happy learning.